Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of How to Market Your Co-working Space the Simple Way.
This podcast is brought to you by Cowork.tools. Super simple onboarding for new members to your workspace. Cowork Tools sorts out your GDPR, your AML, and your KYC. There's even a collaborative payment platform. Of course, I know what all of that means. So stop messing around with your onboarding and get back to building your co-working community. Head to Cowork.tools to get started. Bye!
And this week in the studio, we have Judy Rees, who I just found out that's how you say her name after 10 years. How awkward. So Judy, what are you known for and what would you like to be known for?
Well, I was just remembering that you used to call me X-Ray Specs because my old business was called X-Ray Listening. And I used to be known for helping people to ask questions that got behind and under what people were saying. But through a whole sequence of things, nowadays, what I'm known for is helping people to create online gatherings, whether you call those events or workshops or meetings or seminars or networking things, online gatherings that actually help people to have conversations. The kind of things that create conversations that then go off into individual one-on-one conversations and produce all sorts of interesting things that happen in the real world. So in the last few months, I've been exceptionally busy and it's been brilliant. There's, people are really paying attention to how do you do that? How do you get people talking?
That is absolutely one, because I've been following you pretty much non-stop for a decade now, and what popped up on one of my social networks was that the workshop we did at Mainyard maybe like 5 years ago, where you asked us all, what animal do we feel like when we're working at our best? And I always have little pictures of dolphins around nowadays to remind me, because I'd never thought about it until you asked that question. And I thought, I feel like when I'm at my best, I feel like a dolphin going in and out of the water. And for some of you, that might be a little bit too touchy-feely, but it was very interesting to see that group of people, how they looked at themselves when they were working. And why is it important to think about that? Like that is, I know why that's important, but I can't really explain why it is important.
Well, let's think about it in terms of an online event that really got people talking, engaged, having real conversations, getting down to the stuff that's important to talk about rather than just making small talk. If you imagine yourself in that kind of online event, whether you've ever experienced it or not, imagine what that would be like. For some people, it'll be like a 3-ring circus. For somebody else, it will be like sitting around a kitchen table. For somebody else, it will just be straightforward and practical. Whatever it is for you will be different. And noticing that difference and noticing how you are unique, all of that is part of what motivates people and what creates connection. Because far too often when we're in these terribly boring online events, the thing to do is to try and find common ground, in inverted commas, find out what's similar between you and the other person. Trouble is, if you think about what's similar between you and the other person, after the first flush of recognition, it actually gets a bit boring talking to yourself. Where the interesting stuff is what happens if we can talk about what's different. So if I ask you, for you, Bernie, when you're having a brilliant online conversation with a group, for you, that's like what? And that's a real question, by the way. What's it like for you, Bernie?
Time passes very slowly. So there have definitely been online, because I've been like non-stop on Zoom. There's definitely been things where I'm lose complete track of time, and I think it's to do with because I'm in the same space all the time. That's really great. And then when I'm making lots of notes as well. So if I'm in an online thing, losing track of time and scribbling furiously, that's good. And when I'm kind of checking my email or looking on Facebook for ex-girlfriends or something, that's when it's a bad sign.
And that's a really interesting one. Thank you for that example. So losing track of time, we can probably all relate to that, losing track of time. But the first thing you said, time passes really slowly. When some people will have heard that, they'll go, that's a really interesting, or that's a funny thing to say, is what they'll really be thinking. Because when time passes really slowly, for some people, that means they're bored and they're watching the clock. So notice what's different between you and them, and talking about that and finding ways to ask about that and listen to what's different. All of that can create the ground in which genuine connection, genuine friendship can emerge. Now, most of that kind of metaphorical stuff, the X-ray listening stuff, is not where I tend to spend my energy at the moment, but it's still important. It still underpins everything I do. It's one of the things that I think is critically important when people get online together, is to be listening to each other, not doing their email at the same time, asking each other questions, noticing what's different between you and another person. And in order for that to happen, if you're the creator of the event, what are the things that need to be in place in order for people to have those kinds of conversations? They're not the things that people are typically putting in place for the vast majority of online events at the moment.
So what is one of the things I was going to ask you is when something that stumped me is, I've done a lot of things offline for years, particularly meetups. And I became really interested about how to arrange the room and welcome people in and everything like that. And a lot of that was hung on, what room will we do it in? How will we arrange the furniture? Inviting people into the conversation. And and then I started doing things online and having everything you just said about some people are comfortable talking up. Some people will just sit there quietly. I know I've run some. People still come back, but I've run some. Pretty monotone online events over the last 6 months, and I've been to a lot where people have done it with the best intention, but it's been usually two white men shouting at a microphone, and it's just not been a very. I don't even want to use dynamic, but it's not been a very kind of inclusive, interactive feeling. And something we've done recently is just really gone for inviting people in and then as quick as we can breaking them into Zoom rooms so a few people can talk to each other, and then bringing out and trying to break it up that way. But how do you in the absence of a venue that you curate, how do you curate that online?
Well, I think you and all of your audience knowing how spaces influence conversations makes a really big difference to how you can create online events. So but don't pay attention just to the bit where everybody's sitting in rows listening to somebody from the front. If you think about what really happens at a meetup, the bit where everybody's listening to the speaker is actually, it's important, it gets them there, but it's actually not where the magic's happening. The magic is happening in the conversations of twos and threes, in the gaps in between the speakers, before the event officially happens, after the event officially happens. Some people might go off to the pub afterwards. All of that kind of stuff is part of the magic. So when you're designing an event, combining things that involve small groups and the whole group is part of what you can do. And the brilliant thing, in some ways, the most brilliant thing about online spaces is you've got so many options. You can do astonishing things. So I'm thinking of the very first meetup of yours I went to was in a cellar bar kind of space. And a cellar bar has all sorts of rules about it. Well, there's a bar, so the first thing you do is you buy a drink. It's quite dark, and there's a stage where people are going to stand up and make short pitches or speeches. There are tables to sit down. Well, and all of those kind of things are part of the rules of that space. Online, as event organisers, we make all those decisions, or an awful lot of those decisions are the event organisers to make. The default tools, within something like Zoom or Microsoft Teams or any of the other tools that people use, haven't been designed by co-working experts. Those default tools have been designed by people who think that the person talking from the front is the most important bit. So we end up having to adapt and adjust to figure out how to make this thing work to create the kinds of conversations we want to have. So what you've just described using breakout rooms is a really important part of it. But there's more to it than that. So in the sort of the recipe that I talk about, which I call web events that connect, what happens when people are gathering is really important. How can we recreate that, the welcome from the host? How can we recreate the host introducing you to somebody else and then handing off the two of you to go off and have a chat together, and then maybe introducing somebody else? How can we create that in the first 10 minutes of an online event? Then, of course, there'll be an announcement, there'll be welcome, there'll be so on and so forth, and then maybe somebody will do a pitch or something. But then another small group conversation. Get people into groups to introduce themselves, talk to each other, and so on and so forth. And one of the brilliant things about online is already set up so that you're going to have the asynchronous, the conversation that happens before and the conversation that happens afterwards, naturally fits into this space. So whatever your tool for chatting needs to be built right into the way that the online event happens. Sorry, I'm a bit on my hobby horse here, but am I making sense?
It's brilliant. I'm listening intently rather than checking my email. So with as you're saying that, I'm thinking, because obviously I'm asking on behalf of a friend, but do we think about who the event's for or what technology we have? Because I look at my thing and I'm like, oh, you got Zoom, Webinar Jam, Teams, Slack, all these things, and I kind of we're kind of set in what we're doing at the moment because it works for where we are. But if I'm a co-working space, do I go, I have this, I can do this, or do I go? And another question which you can answer inside of this is, particularly in a co-working space, there's like two activities. There's running an event for the members and the community, and then there's going to be a strong element of like running events to attract people into either the online community or the actual physical building, because there's a kind of keeping the community together, and there's a lead generation aspect. And I have definitely seen people, not that I've ever done this myself, but people confuse both things.
And of course, sometimes one event can do both. But one of the most common mistakes with online events is that people think that because they can invite as many people as they want, they should. Because there are no walls preventing them from inviting 100 people, you don't have to pay a huge fee to hire a space for 100 people. So you invite 100 people. But that means that the quality of the conversations are not as good. You as the organizer don't get to talk to everybody. And the result of that is that while you might be nominally attracting people to the event, if you don't get to talk to them and they don't get to really connect with anybody else who's there, is that really going to translate into a long-term ongoing relationship with you and your co-working space? I think really, if you created a much smaller event with a more specific purpose, you might get a better result on both counts. So one of the co-working spaces near me in Brentford, unfortunately, it's closed because it only just started up but last year, so it hasn't been able to survive the lockdown period. But their thing was they were the maker station. It was a co-working space for people who created artistic and physical and craft objects. And that sounds really niche, especially somewhere like Brentford, which is not known for its artistic community. But because they niched it, and then they niched it even more, they would have events like, oh, we're going to get together, we're going to talk about this specific art of China, is a particular area of China where they make this beautiful tie-dyed printing fabrics. Let's have an event to talk about that. And while it's not going to attract millions of people, it's going to attract people who are interested in particular areas of China, tie-dyes, all those kind of things. And as a result, people who go to it feel more engaged with the speaker, the group, and the co-working space. But if instead you try and do a 2,000 person event at which somebody's going to talk about the importance of the arts in Brentford, it's not going to have the same impact.
I mean, I'm exhausted just thinking about that. What is? Can you? There's. What's my question? So, like, you have a mighty network, which is an online community, and there's something about the way. My stumbling question is about the way we learn, because a strong thing in the co-working universe is people learning from each other. So the example I give is, Maynard in Hackney, where you've been to, is when we did that workshop there, I sat next to Niels, who is a very smart WordPress developer, and I learned so much sitting next to him. When he'd see me googling stuff, and he'd be like, just press that button there, sort of see my screen, and I learned a lot there from that. So there's something about creating a learning environment. But I feel like if my co-working space ran an online course, I wouldn't go to it. But if my co-working space had an online community where we talked, I'd do something. So I kind of know what I mean. But how does that, in your experience, how do we learn from each other online? Because I like at this moment in my life, I don't need another online course.
But what we do need is online conversations. So interestingly enough, within the Remote Together community, we've just been having a conversation about how do you combine the elements of synchronous, where you're all online together for an hour, for two, for a whole day, whatever it might be, and the asynchronous. And it started off, people were saying, well, the original starter question was, how long is it okay for people to spend online together? Should a training course or a conference extend for a whole day, or does it need to stop after 90 minutes? But it's developed into a conversation about how do you put the pieces together. And the example I introduced was of a university degree course, which is somewhere you're going to go really deep into a topic and you're going to learn a lot by connecting with other people. You're going to do individual work, you're going to read, you're going to do essays, you're going to do tests, all those kind of things. But you're also going to have peer group conversations where you all get together. You're also going to have tutor groups or whatever. You're going to have lectures. You're going to have a mixture of different formats. And somehow being in a university means someone is curating all of that stuff and helping you to connect with people who share your passion for that subject, and connect with experts in that subject, and connect with books and other resources about that subject. And it seems to me that an online community like the Remote Together community can be a curated space like a university, which can enable people to do all the different elements of learning. Because it's not enough, in order to learn something, it's not enough just to listen to somebody bang on about it. You need also to do some personal thinking about it, and also to reflect with other people, talk to other people about it.
Splendid. That is a good place to knock off. I feel there's another one of these podcasts coming. I'm going to, ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions about online events, because it's a huge part of what our community does at the moment, just get in touch and send them in, and we'll have you can ask those questions in our own little online community in the Soundwise app. But what's the download you have, the PDF download you have on your website?
It's a how-to guide for how to create web events that connect, of the kind that I've just described. It's free in exchange for your email address. So if you go to Rees McCann I'm stuttering over whether it's .co.uk or .com.
It's .com. It's .com.
I got the .com. Yeah. reesmccann.com, and you click on the how-to guide and give me your email address, and you can get the download. It really does work, and it will work for a whole bunch of different situations, whether that's for your co-working space or for your co-workers, their businesses. So do please spread it around, share the knowledge with other people. I can't talk to everybody individually, so this is the way to spread the information as far as I can.
And I've got so there'll be a link in the show notes for that as well, and as well as going to the website. And where other than your website, is there anywhere else you hang out online a lot? We can hunt you down.
I can be found everywhere, so LinkedIn and Twitter. But the website reesmccann.com, and also the community I was talking about, the Remote Together community, which is remotetogether.mn.co. That's a good place if you're interested in creating online events that are better than in the room ones for more of the people, more of the time. That's the place to be co-learning with other people. Join us there.
We'll put that in the show notes as well. And I would urge people to go to something like this to it will give you a lovely little fuzzy, warm edge in your communities as we go forward. So thanks very much for your time today, Judy. Thanks very much for your attention in your earbuds today, ladies and gentlemen, and stay tuned for another episode. Thank you very much for your time today. As a co-working space owner or manager, you may never know where to start with your marketing, even if you know exactly what needs to be done. Are you always stopping and starting communication for your co-working space? Get distracted by shiny things and new fads? Do you blog once a year and not even know why you're blogging? If you're like me, you've read hundreds of books on business and marketing, but still get stuck in action. How often have you done the same thing 12 weeks in a row? Head to berniejmitchell.com and hit the green book a call button to spend a few hours with me to nail a simple 90-day marketing plan you will actually execute on. We'll work out a 12-week plan of content, emails, and other actions to build your sales funnel. I'm 100% confident I can help you. So confident, in fact, I'll give you your money back right on the spot at the end of our call if you don't find our time together useful. In the last decade, I've helped hundreds of people get clear on where to go next, what tools to use, and how to stay consistent with their marketing. Head to berniejmitchell.com and book a call today.